Go first. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
Matt, just your plans on how to use Trey this year. Will you still use him at the 5 at all, or is it exclusively 4?
Yeah.
What kind of things you have to figure out in terms of how he fits best with Oscar and Daniel?
Right. Yeah, we'll use him more as a 4. There'll be times. I would think that he plays some 5, but I would think most of the time he plays the 4.
How does that fit with Daniel and Oscar?
Daniel's more of a kind of a flip-up lob guy, where Oscar's more of a post guy. Doesn't mean that they can't do the other, because they can. So, just in what we run and what we do, the spacing's important. So you have to have the understanding of where each other is on the court, and then just be able to play off of that. And like a lot of what we do is spacing. But I think it'll be fine. It's kind of tough to explain in theory, instead of like going through like how we actually play and what we do and how they dive and who's into a short roll and who's not, who's playing in the dunker or who's posting and things of that nature. So you just gotta be able to kind of stick to our rules and what we do in each particular situation. But it's not as clean when you play smaller. When you play smaller, there's more space. It's a little more clean, where you can navigate it easier. But there's other parts of the game that we have to be good at, like protecting the rim, rebounding the basketball, just having 2 physical bodies out on the court, especially getting on the offensive glass. I think we have to do a better job rebounding on both ends, and I think that lineup will help us. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, though.
Matt, staying on the 4, what is developed behind Trey with the 4 spot behind him?
You really, from a development standpoint, you're just trying to get guys to make improvements in what they can, what they can do. So for him, it's a position he's played before, so it's not like it's a revelation where he's going somewhere where he's not been. So, he'll be perfectly fine. It's just, adapted to really guarding people that are different, right? He's not a rim protector. And so as a 5, we did a lot of things schematically last year to protect him. And now we won't do as much. We will change some things defensively because we have better size more than anything. But he'll be okay.
Not just a lot of coaches say they like to block out the outside noise. I think that's kind of impossible with the situation that this team is going into the season with. Mm-hmm. But just, I think to a degree, I guess you went through it a couple of years ago, but how do you kind of embrace that, okay, people think you're this good, now you've got to go out and kind of live up to the expectations a little bit?
Yeah, I think anytime you have guys on your team that have had success, they've been through, these scenarios, which they have. And so not everybody though, but so we have to, act, from a collective standpoint, we got to act like, nobody's been through this, but we do have some people that have been through it. I think it's a good thing. You've worked hard to be in a really good position. I think it helps you more from an attention standpoint and like a recruiting standpoint and your program getting noticed, which you always want, but deep down it doesn't help you win the next game. And I think that's where your focus has to be, of just being mature enough to know, hey, I still got to do my job. I can't let my teammates down. I got to stay connected and just go out there and have fun and play. But it is something that's real, right? A lot of times the success will mess with you a lot more than the failure. The failure gets you on edge. The failure makes you look at things clear, where you can win by a basket or 2 and you think you just dominated the game, when in reality you didn't. Now I think it's important going into the season that's why I really enjoy playing a tough exhibition game like Kentucky, because they can say whatever they want. Now you got to go face them in that beehive, and that's who you are. When you walk out of there, that's who you are that day. And now let's learn from that and get better and get ready for that first real game.
Right. Go ahead.
What can your team apply from 2 years ago in terms of the expectations this season, in terms of that day-to-day kind of professionalism and expecting everybody's, crowd to be ready to storm the court and things like that?
I think you can really look at it from the past 2 years. for these guys because we have guys that have been here a while. Obviously, we had success last year, not as much, but we still had success. But no, it's just playing a tough schedule, learning things from the opponents that you play, whether you win or you lose, and just keep getting yourself ready for the next game. I don't think there's anything magical, about it. You have to work hard, you have to prepare, you have to understand what we're doing, and everybody has to stay on the same page. But we're going to need some people to maximize their time, no matter what that time is. I think that's the important piece when you have a deep team, because not everybody gets to play 30 minutes. But when you learn to maximize your time and do everything in your power, normally your time increases. The guys that look at 15 minutes like, what am I supposed to get done in 15 minutes, probably aren't going to play 15 minutes going forward. The guys that look at 15 minutes and say, man, I'm going to do everything in my power in these 15 minutes. I'm going to maximize this and really lock in and just empty my tank. Those guys are probably going to play more or just be excellent in their role. And then that's what we need, across the board. But I think a lot of things will get compared to 2 years ago, but it was a much different team. I think the expectations are the same, but the team is different.
And then another interview you did recently, you said something about our second five would be an NCAA tournament team or something along those lines. Just where did that show up the most competitively this summer, and how has it helped you developmentally?
Yeah, it helps us because there's another ball handler. There's a couple more ball handlers there in Antoine West and Omer Meyer. So that allows us to have two pretty good teams in practice. It allows CJ to just kind of be that combo guard and to play off of those guys. It allows Jakari a lot of wiggle room. Obviously, Fletch is going to fit in like with either team. Liam Murphy and Jack Benner really give us a punch in terms of spreading the defense, making good reads, taking their threes. And then, obviously, TK is going to give one team probably a pretty good advantage there, but we're also going to spread him out on the other end with those guys. Then obviously having Daniel and having Oscar, so we have a lot of depth. You throw Riley Burgess on top of that, it's a pretty good front line. I think I mentioned everybody, Braden, does a lot for us. And so the fact that now you've put even more skill and more size with him is probably going to give that team an advantage. But it's a good thought process, because I said 2 years ago, even though Zach's going to be on one team, we still had two really good teams in practice. And last year we had one good team in practice, which it's here nor there a little bit. In my opinion, I'd rather have two, but you only get judged on having one during games.
Right.
What's the biggest difference you've seen in Jakari this summer?
Just his confidence. I think he knows more what's going on. He's more comfortable out there. And I think he's a pleaser, and he's a guy that wants to do well. And when he doesn't, I think it bothers you. And I think it bothers a lot of people. And so, I think he just is more aware, better understanding of a system. And so it allows him, if you can't instinctually play because you're constantly wondering or thinking or whatever the right word is on what you're supposed to do, you're not going to play at your full ability. You're just not. And now you see he's making plays, he's making shots, he's doing a lot of little things, but he also understands what's going on. So that's what I'd attribute to.
Right, Matt. You talked about the depth a little bit, and obviously last year, maybe not quite so much, but the year before that, you had a lot of depth. What did you learn from those years about how to coach teams like that and how to manage the personalities of the guys who are really good players who are only getting 15 minutes a game? What do you take into this year?
Yeah, that's to answer your last part, is that's probably the hardest thing to do, is try to get them to play, at a high level and really just a higher intensity level, because they're not going to be out there for 30 minutes. Just empty their tank and be able to compete and play hard, sprint both ways, just lay it on the line. And that's hard. And that's not something you sit back and really worry about at this point. because you got to get up to your first game, and then you kind of play through some things from a rotation standpoint. But yeah, the depth of our team is definitely an advantage. But like sometimes you'll have good players that are like at 8, 9, and 10, and you just don't get a very high value from them because they're so used to playing 25 to 30 minutes. So they're good players, but they're really not bringing a lot of value to the team until they can get that 25 or 30 minutes. Well, that's your job as a coach, to be able to talk to them and also kind of share their frustrations. Because like if you've ever been in that role and you've ever played, you know, it's hard to, you know, look at the cup, you know, full of water. Like sit there and say like, is this half full? Is this half empty? Is this like, you're looking at it like, man, like I need more minutes, period. Well, that's not the right way to go about it. You got to look at it like, hey, he subbed me in here for 3 or 4 minutes twice a half. And I got to make the most of it. Because right as you get loose, if you're in that role, you get taken out. So Coach Katie used to always say, like, just don't shoot a 3, like get a lather before you shoot a 3. And I'd say to myself, yeah, as soon as I get my lather, I'm hearing that horn. I mean, you're subbing me out of the game. But I didn't think in my mind, like, I'm the 8th man. But I was the 8th man. So it's hard because you look at it like, if you just give me my chance, then I'll play better. It's not the way it works. Not the way it works. So that's why the summer is so important and the fall is so important, because you're on earning ground, right? But you also got to set your team with your best guys, and you got to set your team with your top scorers. So then when you look at it, like who fits in there better, like that's who really kind of, for us, is going to start with those other 3 guys. Like that's who's going to be able to come in, like who plays. They're not going to play the whole game, but they're going to play a lot, right? And so like who fits in with those guys? I thought CJ did the best job for us last year. Doesn't mean he always stayed with it. Miles would finish some games, G finished some games. And so he wasn't always that guy that finished, but he finished more. But his ability to fit in there last year was a little bit more smooth. You know, G started off the season, he struggled shooting. And so I think that affected it, you know. So I think that's going to be, for us, like, kind of let those answers come to you. A lot of times on really good teams, they don't, because you have more than 5 starters on a good team, right? And that's what makes it hard. But that's their job to make it hard on me.
What did you want your players to learn or take away from the Seagulls situation? What was there a number 1 goal that you wanted them to learn from them?
The thing for me was more of just the leadership piece. They do such a good job in explaining their world and trying to kind of relate to our world, which they're 2 different worlds, really different. But when it comes to leadership, it's not. When it comes to communication, it's not. So there's a lot of things that are on the same plane, even though it's 2 different worlds. I thought just the connectivity, and that's a big thing in basketball, to where sometimes guys they make a mistake in our team game. We have said this is how we're going to defend something, and then when they don't, it's not that it's the worst thing in the world, and what they did, they just disconnected us, because I thought he was going to stay tight and he went under it. And now that frazzled me as a big guy. So just learning to be able to communicate with each other, learn about each other a little bit more, get to know each other a little bit more, you know, just the overall commitment to the team. I think that's a big piece of the SEALs. But also communication. I think the communication, whether that's on or off the court, is really important.
Coach back here, 4 starters back, they've kind of been the backbone of your team for the last few seasons. What's it been like watching their growth from the time they started here to now, and how they continue to elevate themselves for this season?
Yeah, I think the one thing that jumps out is the best teams are always a player-led team. And anytime you can have guys that are confident and sure of themselves, but also selfless, I think that's very important. Those guys have played, you know, those three seniors have played a lot of basketball and a lot of basketball together. Now with the other two seniors that we brought on board, they've played a lot of basketball, but we just collectively haven't played a lot together outside of those three. Because when you add the other pieces, you know, you have freshmen that haven't played, you have fifth years that haven't played here. Now you have some freshmen that are now sophomores. You know, Daniel's, you know, missed the whole season last year, so he hasn't played with them very much. But the other two, Jakari and CJ, you know, they have. Raleigh was hurt last year, still fought through it. He did a little bit. So like, still like learning as a collective group to play together, but their leadership's gonna be really important. And, you know, all of them know that have been here before that everyone's gonna have to sacrifice. Even the guys that play all the time, shoot the most, score the most, like everybody sacrifices and does a lot of little things for the success of the team. But no, those three guys have been, they've been huge for us. And you know, when you become a senior, like that should be your best year, right? That should be your best year. And then that's what you've worked towards, and then they put themselves in a great position.
Take the last one.
Just what have you seen from Jack this summer that tells you that, you know, that decision to redshirt him was the right one, and how is that paying off right now?
Yeah, you know, just his development physically, he's in a much better physical position. We really used him as a 4 in practice because all of our big guys were out, besides TK in the summer. Daniel was with USA Basketball. Oscar had visa, was getting his visa. Liam was recovering from a torn labrum. Raleigh was recovering from his leg surgery. So like, we just kind of put him there, and he naturally, you know, does some really good things. He can put the ball on the floor, he can shoot to 30 feet, he can really pass the basketball. He's competitive. So he's put himself in a good position. It's tough because our front line and our backcourt have a lot of guys. And so it's a good problem for us to have. But it also allows us, I think anytime you can play different ways, it allows you to be able to adjust. Sometimes, like I said, when you have one team, like we were gonna play one way last year, right? And Zach, because he was so good, we were gonna play through him. Like that's obvious, right? But like in this group, like we want to be bigger because we know that helps us rebounding wise. You know, we want to be able to play bigger to protect the rim. I think those were two areas where we struggled last year, but it doesn't, you know, kick out the element that if we have to be the most efficient offensively, we can go with TK at the 5 and those guys can play more at the 4. So if we have to do that, we think that's the right play. And it offsets the other issues we've talked about, or the other strengths that we've talked about too, then so be it. And those two guys, Liam and Jack, they give us that. They give us that ability. It doesn't mean that we couldn't grab a guard and push him down, but they can physically then now guard a forward. Even though they're not traditional power forwards, they're more face-up type guys. Jack's a big guard. So Jack played point guard in high school. So like, not all the time, but when I went to see him, he brought the ball up a lot. So it kind of gives you a guy that you can slide into that spot that can give you some things that other people can't give you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.